extremely impressive. And I don't ever want you to forget that. You were amazing to hear, and people were very impressed with you. And I would like to hear about your journal, your book. Did you make it or did you buy it? It's a wonderful piece, it looks like.
My mother got it for me right before I left.
Looks like an extension
October.
of you.
I quite like it. And I should mention, I actually went to COP as a representative of Quaker as their witness.
Yes.
Yeah, so Shelley gave me a badge. Yeah.
I'm curious how I heard you say that you felt supported by your community and meetings and so on. And I'm curious what what we can do as meetings to support people like you, and what was most effective in your feeling of support.
Well, I think a lot of it is individual, which I know is sort of a wishy-washy answer, but so much of activism in general is trying to figure out the person and how the person fits into the whole. But in my Quaker meeting, I have had clear list committees and support committees, and I grew up there and started my activism there, and many of them have been involved. They're always promoting what I'm doing, and it can be hilarious because I go back and can't walk down the hall without without having people stop me, because it's like having a big congregation of grandparents. But I think as youth, one thing I think is interesting is that I did not resonate with the youth programs in Baltimore Yearly Meeting at all. So I went to, BYM has 3 Quaker camps, and they have young friends meetings and junior young friends meetings and young adult friends meetings, and I've been to them all, but they just didn't work for me. Not to say they aren't wonderful programs, they absolutely are. But what I found really helpful is being in a community that had the multi-generational sharing and the community that mixed a lot. The youth weren't kind of sidelined, or we were a part of it. And that's not to say that when we were little, we sat through all of meeting for worship or attended business meetings, but we were still very much a part of what was going on, just because, the meeting itself is not particularly small, but the youth is a very small part of it. And that meant that we got to, just out of nature of it, we got to be a part of it. And that, I think that was a big part of it. And I got to work with activists in my meeting, Carol Brantley, and who was a big part of starting, and she unfortunately passed away due to cancer, but Nancy Joe and Phil Favero, and we have all of these people who were part of Climate Stewards and actively encouraged my brother and I to come to those meetings and made sure that, we were welcome, even if we were drawing in the back or playing together. And to this day, I still have that support and that active embracing of not only what I'm doing, but who I am.
Something that this was coming to me in the last workshop, where there were activists talking about their experience in a similar vein. And we live in a culture of war that exploits things, and we have lots of infrastructure for supporting that, and we have so little infrastructure that actually supports people to do social change work, and we expect them to live in poverty. And everything that you're saying, and a lot of things that were said in the other workshop, really made me think that if we want to shift this culture in a really substantive way, we really need to have some opportunities to give young adults who are even interested in any way, because you clearly had a calling and then you had support to do what you were doing. But, I had this horrible experience with this young woman who worked for my peace group in Fayetteville, Arkansas, for a couple of years before COVID hit. And when COVID hit, she had a mental breakdown. And so a few months ago, a coworker that was working with her and I on a project she was working on told me that this young woman had told her, I don't even remember working for that at all. None of that it's like it was a different world. And it evaporated for her because she didn't have that support that was reminding her of it and kind of nurturing it along. She had a lot of support to say, you're wasting your time. And it feels to me like Quakers really have had a lot of experience trying to set stuff up. The volunteer teams that would go over and do the ambulance work in World War II, and all the stuff that has happened over the years. We have done that. It has not really had the kind of support that it would really take like a big government to really support the kind of stuff that really needs to happen. But I think there needs to be models developing, doing the very kind of thing. And that your meeting was doing that, was creating a model for how do you create a culture that really supports a young activist to follow that leading. And it's really incredible. And so how would we actually replicate that in other places?
Yeah, I suppose that is the question. I think Quakers have a unique place because we're by no means, but we have been active on various issues and we have a history of being active. But we don't always bring that into our meeting. So I think my mother and another mother in our meeting were the head of the Children's Religious Education Committee for many years, when myself and my brother and Diana, who was the other and one of my close friends for many years, were in first day school. And one of the most interesting things was that we did have people from a meeting who were working on things come in and teach us what they were doing. And then we also had some basically the call for first day school was, if you have something you're interested in, come in and talk about it. So we had first day schools about different activities that were going on in the community. We had ones about past actions that Quakers have taken, whether that's the Underground Railroad or whether it was anti-war protests during Vietnam. And then we also had, I remember one of our members came in and did a first day school presentation on Palestinian food. And there was one who would come in every year and do a workshop on evolution, which doesn't seem like something you would have in a church, but that's what she would do. And she was a former Catholic teacher, so this it was not, and we certainly had Bible stories and more of the traditional Christianity, but a lot of it was simply about what people were passionate about, and then how we bridged that passion with the Quaker testimonies. And that passion could be anything. And that also provided the foundation of having not only the kids be equals, but for the kids, the adults be equals. It wasn't scary to talk to them about what they were interested in because they'd come in and talk to us about it and they were willing to share. So now we could, if we had more questions or thought, or, ooh, I'm really interested in gardening too, could talk to them. And it certainly wasn't perfect by any means, but it did foster that, that open line of communication between the youth of our meeting and the adults. Yeah.
I kind of took a little break from quicker things for a while, and it sounds like you're sort of in a resting place from what you've been doing, and that you're, you know, the next phase is sort of coming. That's the way your story sounded to me. And the thing that made me come and listen to you and to come to the meeting was a friend of mine had sent me a link to the Kiss the Ground Netflix show, and you know, it was pithy, and I'm kind of thinking, so out of your current experience, what are your pithy things that you want people to hear? And so that's sort of my question. Really, people get, you know, 5 or 10 things out of your story. I think sometimes for me, it's clarifying to say, here's where I am, here's what I want to communicate. So I'm asking you that.
Oh, that's a hard answer.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer.
I guess, think about that one for a minute. I mean, what I've learned from being an activist is that there's no one way or right way to do it, go about it or do it. And there is no one issue that is more important than any other. It is simply where you fit into it. And I mean, it's all one world and everything we work on is really all one big problem that we're all trying to address in our different ways from our different experiences and our different lenses. So, and by the nature of the beast, we're going to have to fracture it down into different pieces, whether that's by different organizations or different issues or different countries, but just because it's too big to handle it all, and if you try, you're going to run yourself ragged. But we can't forget about that, even as we're in our own little areas trying to work on that bill in the county, or trying to get your meeting to reinstall a water fountain. We can't forget that we're a part of a much bigger picture, and that no other activist is doing it wrong.
I have another question. I don't want to harm the core, but it's very
That's
curious.
probably the last question.
Yeah, I don't know what time it is.
I do.
Ah, yes.
So if my math is right, you're 18 right now.
I am.
Yeah, and so my question is, I have boys who are a little older than you, and what's fascinating to me is sort of how your view of the world has been shaped by your activism, and I'm curious how you look at the world moving forward, especially since, you know, most of your contemporaries are probably graduating from high school and probably going to college or thinking about a career. And I'm sort of curious how you look at the world, the activism, and from that perspective.
Well, I mean, as far as climate change goes, what my thought is that eventually we're going to be forced to change. Well, not even with just climate change, but with our general system of exploitation of other beings, other people. We can't keep living like this. And eventually we're just not going to be able to keep going. And we're going to have to change that system. It's just a question of how much are we going to lock in before that, and how peacefully can we make that change, which I realize is a huge question, but that's the way I'm looking at it. So my thought is I'm just going to keep going, trying to push that line back towards us as much as we can, but that we're just going to have to get there at some point. And with that, it is hard to think about the future because we don't have the baseline that is societal expectations. It's hard to say, oh, I'm going to go to college and become a doctor because I know I can make good money. So I don't really know where I am in the world or where I'm going to be moving forward, because my thought is that, you know, at some point this is all going to change. So the only constant I really see is that that change.
So, thank you, Kallen.
I'm glad
And-
to be
and,
here. Thank you.
Tomorrow, when Kallen is giving a workshop, I will also be giving one in the other room. And so I wonder if somebody would like to learn to be, and it doesn't take very long, to be an amateur videographer so that we can record it and then we'll have it available. If someone would just be willing to stay about 10, maybe 15 more minutes, I can show you what you need to do.
What time is that tomorrow?
It's 5:15.
Tomorrow, how about?
Oh, the workshop tomorrow is, I don't know.
2:45 to 4. 2:45 to 4.
I'll stick around too, just in case we have a, that we have a
Okay.
spare.
All right, thank you. Thank you. If you have any final words, that's fine. I just didn't want to not get it before people ran out.
Well, just thank you all for being here and thank Val for inviting me and tracking me down. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Thank you.